What up, peeps? I'm chilling in my new spot, all cozy on the couch. I got my room all fixed up. It's sweet. So I can actually sit in here without being cramped. Anyway, I'm kind of still tired this morning. I just woke up a little while ago, and I just I was kind of inspired to make this quick video this morning for someone who, well, you know who you are. We were commenting back and forth about the ego, and is the ego important, and their comment was basically to the sense that ego is the problem of the problems that we face in the world are all caused by ego. And I was saying that basically all the goodness that happens comes from ego. And I don't disagree with their point of view, and I believe that both points of view are correct. And especially if you take into account Freud's idea of the superego, the ego, and the id. Everybody's heard of the id, the primal mind. And then there's the standard ego, which basically tells you your primal desires, the things that you want to have, you know, how to get yours. And I think this is an interesting concept and subject, because here are two somewhat intelligent people who are disagreeing on the definition of ego. Or maybe not disagreeing, but having different impressions of what ego is. And I find that fascinating, because I thought about it for a few minutes and I realized that I was on the other side of the fence a few years back. That I was the one who was saying that ego is the destroyer, ego corrupts. And then I had this discussion with a person one time about ego, and they said, why would I want to give up my ego? It's who I am. Something as simple as that statement was, you know, it made me think deeper on the subject, and come to the conclusion that ego must be embraced. The description I gave in my comment was, it's like a knife. It can be used as a tool, or it can be used to cut and harm, and that's just how everything seems to be. So without our ego, we are not individuals, because the ego is the image that we have of ourselves, I guess. And in more depressed societies, the ego does not come up as much. But, you know, in a capitalistic society, the ego runs rampant, and it destroys lives here in the Western world. And that's totally understandable why we hate ego, but it doesn't mean that ego is, that you can live without it. And the primal mind needs to be harnessed, controlled, but I was trying to explain in the comment how without that oomph, that motivation that comes from having an ego, from, say, wanting to prove yourself that you can do something, not necessarily to be better than another person or anything, but say somebody says, you can do it, man, you can do it. And so you work harder at it, and you complete this amazing thing that helps a bunch of people, whatever it may be. You've been pushed into that by using your ego as a tool to say, well, I can do this, and then I'll be prideful. But they always tell you, and especially in religion, that pride comes before the fall, which is true. The trick is that you can't just eliminate pride from your life, or you can't eliminate ego. You have to embrace them both. And you have to be prideful of the things that you do. Otherwise, I've seen that people fall into this pit of depression and self-pity and loathing, or poor me, the poor me attitude that, oh, I'm just screwed, the world's just treating me so horribly. No, that's because you haven't embraced your ego enough. And so, that sounds kind of harsh, but a self-esteem comes from that ego. And so, if we don't have the ego, we have no self-esteem. If we have no self-esteem, we have no drive to impress. If we have no drive to impress, not just others, but ourselves, or to show ourselves we can do it, which comes from the ego, then we cannot move forward in any capacity as a species. If I could give you an example, birds have mating calls and dances, all kinds of things they do. Birds will fight, not usually to the death, but they will definitely brawl for a mate. And usually the loser walks away knowing that he's a loser. And you might be able to say that comes from ego, the ego of the bird. But some people would say, no, that's just instinct. But is it really? Is it instinct? Because humans could rely on everything, say everything's instinct. Oh, well, I just did that. That's just instinct. That's just instinct. No, that's ego, often. And I think that animals have their own form of ego that helps them to survive and helps the wisest and the most capable to reproduce. And in the human lineage, and I better not even get into this subject because people get all upset about it, but when survival of the fittest ceased to be part of the repertoire of man, it was when we stopped controlling the types of genetic material we let in the gene pool, then, and I don't mean controlling by like physically saying this is who we're going to let breed. Not. I'm talking about that since nature stopped taking its course, since the brutal days when you know, if you were born as a psychopath, you might be cast out of your society, or if you were born with, unfortunately with disabilities, you'd be cast out. But that's what birds do. That's what animals do too. The difference with humans is that we're compassionate and we can take care of one another. But ultimately, that leads back to whether or not we want to care for one another. And without ego, we can't have any capacity to understand why we should care for one another. It's hard to explain. I can't even really get it out here, except for if I could leave on one note, it would be to embrace the ego for what it is and use it as a tool. It's never going to go away. People are never going to stop having egos. But realize if you're having a discussion with someone, let's say over whether ego is important or not, at least know that you agree on the description of what an ego is, and look into Freud's work a little bit and see if that resonates, because I think that, there are different forms of ego. The superego can take over, and the id can take over if we don't let ourselves be, respectful and take care of our shit. So, anyway, since that fateful day when I was discussing about ego with someone, from that day forward, I've carried my ego with a sense of respectability. When people cast stones at me saying that I'm egotistical, which is pretty rare that it really happens, it's just when I get into a discussion with someone and they don't like what I have to say, they tell me I'm egotistical. I think about it and I say, am I being egotistical here? And that's the thing important, is to be honest with ourselves, because I'm learning to harness my ego to where I'm not harming anyone with it. And as humans, we have the capacity to do that. So I guess that's all I got. Ego. It is what it is. Peace.